They weren't royals, but their jewels could rival any crown in Europe. Some say even the Romanovs envied them. These weren't just jewels, they were works of art shaped by Cartier and Chaumet, destined for the most dazzling stages of Imperial Russia. But soon, whispers of scandal, shadows of upheaval, and then silence. What really happened to them? From a wedding tiara made of rock crystal to diamonds linked to a doomed queen, this is not just a story of jewels. It's a story of beauty, danger, and a family whose fortunes shimmered on the edge of history. Who were they? What became of their treasures? And why are they so rarely spoken of today? Let's begin the forgotten story of the House of Yusupov. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. Now, before we really get to the heart of it and meet the individuals whose lives became so intertwined with these treasures in the 20th century, it's worth taking a moment to understand just who this family was. For centuries, the Yusupovs weren't just wealthy. They were a cornerstone of Russian aristocracy. Their lineage was ancient, stretching all the way back to the Tatar Khans of the Nogai horde. Quite a remarkable history in itself. And their influence in Imperial Russia, well, it was pretty much unparalleled, second only to the Romanovs. We're talking about legendary palaces that were marvels of architecture and design, art collections that could stand shoulder to shoulder with Europe's finest, and a fortune that was, by any measure, simply vast. And this wasn't wealth acquired overnight. Generations of Yusupovs, particularly from the late 18th and through the 19th centuries, were renowned connoisseurs and passionate collectors. They traveled Europe, commissioning and acquiring masterpieces, both art and, of course, breathtaking jewels. So, the inheritance itself, the collection we're about to explore, was already steeped in history and incredible value long before our main characters took center stage. And that brings us to the figures at the center of our story today. Prince Felix Yusupov, an heir who was as charismatic as he was, shall we say, controversial, and his wife, the Princess Irina. She, of course, was the niece of the last Tsar, Nicholas II, which adds another layer to their already fascinating position. It was truly through their hands, during some of the most tumultuous times imaginable, that so many of these magnificent jewels would pass. Some were cherished, as you'd expect, but many others were destined to be sold in the quiet desperation of exile, and a heartbreaking number were tragically lost to history in ways we'll explore. It's quite a journey they, and their jewels, went on. So when Felix Yusupov came into his inheritance, and especially with his mother, the famously elegant Princess Zinaida, still very much a guiding force, the family collection was already the stuff of legends. It wasn't just about quantity, it was the sheer historical weight and royal connections many of these pieces carried. These weren't just pretty baubles. They were tangible links to empresses, kings, and pivotal moments in European history. Take, for instance, one of their most iconic heirlooms, the La Pellegrina pearl. Now, it's easy to get it confused with another famous pearl, La Peregrina, but the Yusupov Pellegrina was a stunner in its own right, a magnificent, large oval pearl. Princess Zinaida was often photographed and painted wearing it, sometimes as a striking pendant. It had been in the family since 1826, acquired by an earlier Yusupov matriarch, Tatiana Vasilyevna, and passed down through the generations. As we'll see, this particular pearl was one Felix managed to carry out of Russia, and it has a rather interesting journey ahead of it. And then there were pieces with direct ties to one of history's most tragic queens. The Yusupovs owned several personal items that had once belonged to Marie Antoinette, and among them was a pair of truly magnificent diamond earrings. We're talking about substantial diamonds here, one over 14 carats, the other over 20. These too were bought in Paris, again by Tatiana Yusupova, back in the 19th century. Imagine owning something so intimately connected to such a famous and ill-fated royal figure. It's no wonder Felix would later see these as a significant asset when life took a very different turn. The collection also boasted some truly world-class diamonds. One of the stars was undoubtedly the Polar Star diamond. This was a remarkable stone, over 40 carats, and with a fascinating history of its own, believed to have once been owned by Joseph Bonaparte, Napoleon's elder brother. It came into the Yusupov family, again through Princess Tatiana Yusupova, and was renowned for its brilliance. It's a diamond that would feature prominently in Felix's life later on, in ways both dazzling and perhaps a little desperate. We'll certainly be revisiting its story. Another significant diamond in their vaults was the Sultan of Morocco. This was a beautiful cushion-cut grayish-blue diamond of over 35 carats. It was acquired by Prince Nicholas Borisovich Yusupov, this time Felix's great-grandfather, back in 1840. Blue diamonds are exceptionally rare, so this was a truly prized possession. And like the Polar Star, its story didn't end with the revolution. And sometimes, the stories around these gems are as much about their influence as their sparkle. There was a light pinkish diamond, around 17.5 carats, known as the ram's head. Apparently its shape was a bit unusual, though sadly, no photograph of it seems to have survived. But this diamond has a fascinating connection to the world of high fashion. It was later owned by the incredibly stylish heiress Daisy Fellows, and it's said that when she showed it to the legendary designer Elsa Schiaparelli, Schiaparelli was so captivated by its vibrant pink hue that it inspired her iconic shocking pink color. Isn't it amazing how a single gemstone can ripple out and influence something so culturally significant? Finally, among these inherited treasures was a spectacular black pearl necklace with a truly imperial provenance. These weren't just any black pearls. They were said to have originally belonged to Catherine the Great herself. The story goes that Catherine gifted them to her favorite, Prince Grigory Potemkin. He, in turn, bequeathed them to his niece, the same Tatiana Vasilyevna, who was Potemkin's niece, who then married into the Yusupov family, bringing these historic pearls with her. So, when Felix and Irina wore or handled these pearls, they were touching a piece of Russia's grand imperial past. And like the Pellegrina, this necklace also made its way out of Russia with Felix, heading towards a rather eventful chapter in America. So, you can see, the foundation of the Yusupov collection was already incredibly strong, filled with pieces that were not just valuable, but also deeply resonant with history. And it was into this glittering inheritance that Prince Felix Yusupov prepared to bring his bride, Princess Irina Romanova. Their wedding in February 1914 was one of the last grand imperial spectacles before the world changed forever. Felix, one of Russia's wealthiest and most eligible bachelors, marrying the Tsar's only niece. It was quite the event. And, as you can imagine, a union of this magnitude occasioned the creation and acquisition of a breathtaking array of new jewels for the young princess. Many of these were commissioned by Felix himself, or by his ever-generous mother Zenaida, from the most celebrated jewelry houses of the day, particularly Cartier and Chaumet in Paris. One of the most talked-about pieces was Princess Irina's wedding tiara, a truly ethereal creation by Cartier. It wasn't your typical diamond tiara. This one was ingeniously crafted from carved rock crystal, platinum, and diamonds, giving it an almost icy or frosted appearance. It was made in 1911, and Felix acquired it for Irina in early 1914. There are photographs of Irina wearing it on her wedding day, often with a delicate lace veil. Some say the veil itself once belonged to Marie Antoinette, though Felix's mother-in-law, Grand Duchess Xenia, claimed it was hers. Either way, the tiara itself was a masterpiece of subtle beauty. Then there was the magnificent sunburst tiara from Chaumet. This was commissioned by Princess Zenaida for her new daughter-in-law. It was designed in such a way that the central element was intended to hold a truly spectacular gemstone. And according to Chaumet's archives, that stone was meant to be the family's own Polar Star diamond. It's quite distinct from a somewhat similar tiara made by Cartier. The Chaumet Sunburst has a delicate border of round diamonds, which helps tell them apart. Chaumet was also responsible for a very versatile ruby tiara for Irina. This was another wedding gift, and its clever design allowed the rubies to be interchanged with other gemstones, perhaps emeralds, sapphires, pearls, or even large diamonds, depending on the occasion or the rest of her attire. It could be quite dramatic with its vibrant rubies. And, of course, no grand parure would be complete without emeralds. Chaumet created a stunning emerald parure for Irina, which included a substantial devant de corsage, a type of corsage ornament that could often be worn in different ways, featuring a striking 14-carat triangle-cut emerald. That particular emerald had a history, too. It originally came from a pendant belonging to Princess Zenaida. There were matching earrings as well, completing the set. It's also worth noting that Prince Felix later compiled a jewelry album, and in it there's a rather curious presentation involving one of the emerald pieces. He appears to have combined its image with an illustration from an auction catalog of Russian crown jewels, creating a depiction of a beautiful brooch that, in reality, never existed as such. It's a small but fascinating detail, perhaps, showing how family records and memories can sometimes shape their own narratives. In fact, Chaumet was commissioned to create 5 complete parures for Princess Irina as part of her wedding gifts, one for each of the great classic gemstones: diamonds, emeralds, pearls, rubies, and sapphires. It's almost hard to fathom the sheer scale of such a gift, a true testament to the Yusupovs' immense wealth and their desire to adorn their new princess in a manner befitting her station and their own. These were the jewels that were meant to be worn at the glittering courts of Europe, symbols of a seemingly unshakable world. But that glittering world, as we know, was not to last. The winds of change were blowing fiercely across Russia, and the Yusupovs, for all their wealth and influence, would find themselves right in the path of the storm. And in many ways, Prince Felix himself played a role in hastening its arrival. His involvement in the infamous assassination of Grigory Rasputin in December 1916 was a pivotal moment. Whatever his motivations, and there are many theories, the act had profound consequences, not just for the imperial family, but for the Yusupovs directly. Felix was exiled to one of his remote family estates, and though this perhaps inadvertently saved them from the immediate chaos in Petrograd when the revolution fully erupted, it was a clear sign that their privileged world was crumbling. As the political situation in Russia deteriorated rapidly throughout 1917, with the Tsar's abdication and the rise of the Bolsheviks, it became increasingly clear that their old life was over. Faced with this terrifying uncertainty, Felix made a decision that would have enormous implications for the family's treasures. He decided to hide the bulk of their jewels. It wasn't just a few pieces tucked away. We're talking about a significant portion of their collection, including many of Princess Irina's magnificent wedding tiaras and parures we just discussed. These were secreted away in a specially constructed strongroom, hidden beneath a staircase in their Moscow palace in Karitonyevsky Lane, hoping, one imagines, for a day when they could be safely retrieved. It must have been an incredibly tense and difficult undertaking to conceal such immense value with the world falling apart around them. Some pieces, however, were deemed too important, too valuable, or perhaps too portable to be left behind to an unknown fate. Felix, with his characteristic resourcefulness, did manage to secure a selection of their most significant gemstones and a few key pieces of jewelry. These were the treasures he and Irina would carry with them as they navigated the treacherous path out of Russia. By 1919, the situation in Crimea, where many of the aristocracy, including the Yusupovs, had gathered, became untenable. Along with the Dowager Empress Maria Fyodorovna and other Romanov relatives, Felix, Irina, and their young daughter made their escape aboard the British warship HMS Marlborough. They left their homeland behind forever, carrying with them what little they could salvage from their once vast fortune. And those jewels they managed to bring out? They weren't just mementos of a lost world. They were about to become their primary means of survival, their lifeline in a new and uncertain life in exile. For several years after the Yusupovs fled Russia, that hidden strongroom in their Moscow palace lay undisturbed, a silent testament to a vanished era. Felix had hoped, perhaps, to one day return and reclaim his family's heritage, but that day never came. Instead, in the summer of 1925, during some routine renovation work at the now nationalized palace, the secret was revealed. Workmen, intrigued by an oddly plastered archway in the basement, broke through to find a steel door. And behind that door lay a treasure trove that stunned even the hardened Bolshevik authorities. Imagine the scene. 7 heavy chests, crammed not just with old clothes used as padding, but with an astonishing collection of Yusupov valuables. Reports from the time speak of over a ton of silver items, ancient cups, ladles, and decorative pieces. There were around 13 kilograms of gold objects. And then, the jewels. Hundreds of them. The inventory listed some 255 brooches, 42 bracelets, and significantly for our story, at least 12 tiaras. Among these were undoubtedly many of Princess Irina's magnificent wedding gifts, that beautiful Cartier Rock Crystal tiara, the Chaumet Sunburst, the ruby tiara, and elements of those 5 precious parures. It was, by any account, a king's ransom, suddenly in the hands of the new Soviet state. For these particular Yusupov jewels, the ones so carefully hidden by Felix, this discovery marked a definitive and tragic end to their existence as intact works of art. There would be no quiet return to a family vault, no future generations of Yusupov women to wear them. Their fate was now sealed by the revolution that had swept away their owners. The Soviet government, of course, had its own plans for such a windfall. Some of the discovered items, particularly those of significant historical or artistic merit beyond just their material value, were initially exhibited. There are famous photographs from 1925 showing officials and jewelers meticulously examining the glittering hoard laid out on tables. You can actually see some of Irina's tiaras in these images, their delicate forms captured one last time before their dissolution. But the primary goal was not preservation in the Yusupov sense. The nascent Soviet state was desperately in need of foreign currency. So, after the initial inventory and display, the process of utilization began. For the most part, these magnificent creations were systematically dismantled. Gemstones, large and small, were carefully prized from their intricate settings. The platinum and gold mounts, themselves works of craftsmanship, were unceremoniously melted down for their bullion value. The individual stones, now unmoored from their historic designs, were then sold abroad, often discreetly, to raise funds for the new regime. The glorious Yusupov tiaras, the ones Irina had worn with such elegance, the ones that represented the pinnacle of Parisian artistry from Chaumet and Cartier, would never be worn again. They exist now only in photographs, in archival drawings, and in the memory of a family and an era that was no more. And yet, in a poignant turn of history, decades after this systematic destruction, the fascination with these lost imperial treasures endured. So much so that in 2018, a decision was made in Russia to recreate one of Irina's most iconic pieces, her icy wedding tiara by Cartier. The jewelry house Axanov crafted a stunning replica from silver, rock crystal, and topaz, which was then gifted to the Yusupov Palace on the Moika River in St. Petersburg. Today, it offers visitors a tangible echo of the original's breathtaking charm, a small testament to the enduring power of beauty and memory even after such profound loss. So, while a significant part of the Yusupov treasure met its end in that Moscow strongroom, Felix and Irina weren't entirely without resources when they arrived in Paris. The selection of jewels they had managed to carry out of Russia, those carefully chosen pieces, now became their lifeline. Paris in the 1920s was a hub for Russian émigrés, a city filled with deposed royalty and aristocracy trying to rebuild their lives. For the Yusupovs, this meant adapting to a vastly different from the one they had known. They famously opened a fashion house, Urfe, a combination of their names, Irina and Felix. It had some success, particularly in its early years, catering to a wealthy international clientele. But businesses, especially in the volatile post-war economy, required capital. And that capital, more often than not, came from the gradual sale of their remaining jewels. It was a slow, piece-by-piece dismantling of their portable heritage, stone by stone, to fund their existence, their ventures, and to maintain some semblance of their former lifestyle, however diminished. And in this process, the great Parisian jewelry houses, particularly Cartier, played a significant role, often acting as intermediaries or purchasers. Let's look at what happened to some of those survivor pieces, the ones that made it out with Felix and Irina. The magnificent La Pellegrina pearl, that historic family heirloom so often worn by Princess Zinaida, was one of the treasures Felix held onto for a remarkably long time, a testament, perhaps, to its sentimental value. He cherished it for many years, even exhibiting it in London in 1935. But eventually, the need arose, and in 1953, he finally parted with it, selling it to a Genevan jeweler named Jean Lombard. The Pellegrina wasn't destined to stay hidden forever, though. It resurfaced at a Christie's auction in Geneva in 1989, where it commanded a very impressive price, confirming its enduring allure and historical significance before disappearing once more into a private collection. Then there were those incredible Marie Antoinette diamond earrings. Given their historical significance and sheer carat weight, they were always going to be a major asset. In 1928, Felix sold these legendary earrings, and it was Pierre Cartier who acquired them. Cartier, in turn, sold them that same year to the prominent American heiress and avid collector of Russian art, Marjorie Merriweather Post. Mrs. Post, known for her discerning taste, had them subtly modernized by Cartier, and later again by Harry Winston, though always with respect for their origins. And thanks to her generosity, these earrings have found a permanent and public home. In 1964, her daughter donated them to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., where they are now part of the National Gem Collection at the National Museum of Natural History, admired by thousands each year. It's rather wonderful when such a piece finds its way into a place where everyone can appreciate its beauty and history, isn't it? The Polar Star diamond was another of the Yusupovs' premier gems that Felix managed to take out of Russia. Its journey in exile was a bit more complex. Felix repeatedly pawned it with Cartier in London, a common practice for émigrés needing ready cash. Eventually, in 1928, Cartier sold the diamond on his behalf to Lady de Terding, the wife of the oil magnate Sir Henri de Terding, founder of Royal Dutch Shell. Cartier even created a stunning new necklace setting for it, surrounded by emeralds, for Lady de Terding. The Polar Star later appeared at a Christie's auction in Geneva in November 1980, where it fetched a remarkable 8 million Swiss francs, which was an astonishing sum, around $5.1 million at the time. There was another sale in 2008 of a diamond of similar quality for nearly $7 million, which the seller explicitly compared to the Polar Star, highlighting the enduring allure and value of stones of that caliber, though the exact lineage of that particular stone remains a topic for gemologists. The rare grayish-blue Sultan of Morocco diamond also made the journey out of Russia with Felix. Like other key pieces, it was eventually sold through Cartier, sometime between 1922 and 1925. For many years, its whereabouts were less public, but it resurfaced in 1972 when it was sold for a considerable sum to a private American collector in San Francisco. It remains one of the world's largest and most important blue diamonds. Now, the story of the pink ram's head diamond takes a more unfortunate turn. While it was once in Yusupov possession and then, as we mentioned, famously inspired Elsa Schiaparelli through its owner Daisy Fellows, its fate was rather grim. Sometime after captivating Schiaparelli, the ring containing this unique 17.47 carat pink diamond was stolen from Daisy Fellows, and despite its rarity and distinctive color, no trace of it has ever been found. It simply vanished, becoming one of the lost treasures of the jewelry world. And finally, what of that black pearl necklace said to have belonged to Catherine the Great? Felix and Irina's arrival in America in November 1923 with these pearls was, shall we say, eventful. U.S. Customs initially impounded their jewels, demanding hefty duties which the Yusupovs struggled to pay. Felix scrambled, eventually paying what was then a significant sum of $12,000 just to release the black pearls. He then tried to sell them himself, without much luck. Finally, he turned to Princess Zinaïda's friend, Pierre Cartier. Cartier advanced Felix a substantial amount against their sale, and just a few weeks later, in 1924, sold the necklace to Matilda Townsend Gerry, a wealthy American heiress. The price was a staggering $400,000. To put that in perspective, that's estimated to be nearly $6 million in today's money. Matilda herself wrote about the impulse purchase, admitting she'd probably gone a bit mad but couldn't resist them. A decade later, Matilda sold the necklace, possibly to another collector, Gertrude Boyce Thompson. And after that, the trail goes cold. Whether Mrs. Boyce Thompson kept them, sold them on, or bequeathed them to heirs, we simply don't know. Another great Yusupov treasure whose current whereabouts remain a tantalizing mystery. The Yusupov jewels tied to Felix and Irina truly capture a dramatic story of splendor and profound loss. While many pieces vanished, Felix's foresight in saving key treasures, like the Polar Star diamond and Marie Antoinette's earrings, ensured a remarkable legacy survived. And while the grand, historically documented jewels largely left the family's possession, there are suggestions that a few personal pieces might still be cherished by their descendants today, quiet echoes of a once staggering collection. Indeed, the full story of every single item may never truly be known, which really makes you think about all the hidden histories within these historic pieces, doesn't it? What are your own reflections on the Yusupov story and the fate of their incredible jewels? Is there a particular lost piece whose disappearance you find especially poignant? It's always fascinating to think about what might have been. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If you found this story as compelling as I do, a like would be wonderful. And do subscribe and hit the notification bell for more journeys into the world of historic jewels. Until next time.